Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Kristy, Wallace, and Maricella, Herrera.
Hello and welcome to the Ellevate podcast. This is your host, Kristy Wallace, with my co-host, Maricella Herrera. Hey, Maricella.
Hey, Kristy.
How's it going?
It's going. It's too cold for my taste, but other than that, it's going.
Yes. Yeah. Well, as you know, I barely left my house for 3 weeks between the December, end of December and mid-January. My family got COVID, all 5 of us, and with the timelines of quarantines, we spent a lot of time inside. So I didn't get to, I guess you would put it in quotes, appreciate the cold as much as maybe you have. But it's, it's definitely a love-hate relationship if you live in the Northeast.
Yeah. Well, it hits me hard because I just came back from El Salvador and it's cold. I'm escaping to London next week, so that'll be fun. It'll be cold, but not as cold. Yeah, but speaking of, you haven't really told us, I mean, you've told me, but you haven't really told in the podcast a little bit of how that went with your rolling quarantine. Feels like it's been quite the month for you.
It has. It's been a lot. I mean, there's so much to unpack. But I think, we've definitely seen a rise in the New York area, which is where I live, and my family, all 5 of us are vaccinated. So fortunately, we did get COVID, but it was relatively mild. But it's tricky. I realized my youngest, who's 7 right now, was 5, just barely 5 when this all started. When she found out she had COVID, she got so upset. She was sobbing because we've spent 2 years saying, be safe, you don't want to get COVID. And so then when she had it, we were so blasé about it. Not intentionally, just we were just talking about it. I was like, oh my gosh, so always positive. And I didn't realize the impact that has on kids. But also the impact it has on us. I mean, there's a lot of, associations that come to mind after going through this for a number of years, and a little PTSD around homeschooling and quarantining and all of that. We just really tried to be as positive as we could about it, and it's a situation we're in. We missed all of our holidays with family, so we're going to make that up. How it's about the meaning behind it, not that specific date. So we're gonna definitely redo a lot of that, which will be fun. And I'd say the hardest thing has really been the homeschooling again. That first week of January, I was teaching. I was teaching. Oh my gosh, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and 7th grade, basically, with the kids. And first week back at work. Also a time of year when I'm really reflective about myself and kind of who I am and what my goals are and what steps I need to take. And so it felt very overwhelming, and thinking about our health and well-being. And I would just say, the things that really, really kept me going is this community and this team, and my friends and my family, and the little daily check-ins from friends who would text and say, how are you doing? And the care packages and gifts we received, and Ellevate sent us donuts and pancakes, which, we had breakfast for dinner, and my kids were so excited. And I mention that because it is, regardless of pandemic or not, but I think it's very easy to feel alone, or to feel like you're struggling with something or a situation maybe others don't understand, or they don't see or recognize. And so my ask of all of you who are listening today is to just show up for each other. If you see someone who's sick, or maybe struggling with the time of year, struggling to hit their goals, struggling with anything, just take an action. And sure, it's easy to say, well, what can I do? How can I help? But I think the best thing is just to help. Don't even ask, just do it. Just send them a kind text or note, or, ice cream, or, whatever that is, that little thing to pick them up, to help them feel like someone sees them and is there for them. And it really matters. And, at the core of Ellevate and what we stand for, what we believe in, it is that community. It's of taking action. It's showing up, every week for someone at our round table or, through our squads program. It's not asking what can I do, but just jumping in and doing it, making that connection, offering the advice. And so during this past 3 weeks of quarantine we had, it was hard, but it was also just so full of love and kindness and, family, friends, and community that I came out of it stronger and better and more appreciative of the amazing humans in my life.
Aw, that's a silver lining.
Yeah. I always got to look for the silver lining. It's I think my own coping mechanism for trying to get through some of these times.
We are so different.
That's why we get along so well.
Yeah, because I'd be like, I'm done. But that's good. I mean, it does make a difference to have that support system and to have just people checking in. And I agree 100% with you. It's don't even ask, like, do you need anything or how can I help? To me, that question is usually very overwhelming. Like, I don't know how you can help me, but just check in and, bring comfort. And that's a big way of helping.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, just in general in terms of communicating with others and support. And you're right, oftentimes you may ask and it's like, I don't know how to communicate this. I don't even know what I want or how to say that. And, how does that manifest in our lives, in our workplace, in the communities we're a part of? And communication is something we do almost every moment of every day in every situation we're in. And yet we're oftentimes so bad at it, and I know I am. I'll forget to update someone on something or to check in with someone or, to be explicit on what I need and if I know what it is. And so, yeah, just this idea of starting this time just intentionally thinking about how we communicate with others, just, showing them that we're there, we're supporting them, asking for what we need, communicating goals if it's, that time of year, goal setting, communicating whatever that may be. You can also help people hold you accountable too, because if they know what you're trying to achieve, if you've been able to communicate that, then they make the ask, then they'll be able to support you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've done a lot with the kids and homeschooling, and I would say, I don't have kids, so I don't know. I can't imagine how that feels to have all of these things. Like if it's overwhelming for me as a single person, I cannot imagine how it has been for you in the last few weeks. But I would imagine that one thing we do have at Ellevate that's really great, and that is, I think, by design, because it is a company built and ran by people who are highly empathetic and know what things are like. You have the flexibility, and the way our company set up is really about human access, right? Like, how can you make it better for everyone? And I don't know, I've been thinking a lot about how that will change or can change. It's been the norm through COVID for companies to come back and try to be flexible and like have to adapt to this flexibility and hybrid environment. But will it continue? And if it continues, will it be successful or will it end up hurting women? Because at the same time, we still have to do everything.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to reframe that a bit because, we talk about business and policies and structures and systems. It's easy to say, oh, yeah, we're going to do this for the caregivers, right? We'll do this to help with the caregivers. Maybe it's, no emails after 9 o'clock or no meetings before 8 a.m. or whatever you're doing to help the caregivers. But I argue it helps all of us, just because it's a human-centered aspect of thinking that our jobs aren't 100% of who we are. And outside of those jobs, maybe you're caring for a parent or a child. Maybe you are training for a marathon. Maybe you volunteer somewhere else. Maybe you're, pursuing your side hustle. I mean, whatever it is, starting to think about our employees as humans who, have other interests and needs and priorities. And then just as humans who are diverse and unique. And so, how can you create a workplace that is human centered, that has better policies for all, that is creating the acknowledgement that we're diverse and have different situations and space for people to show up as they are, if it's an ERG group or affinity group. It's like asking your teams, like, what do you need? How can we best support you? What are the ways in which maybe you're struggling? And I think that that's key, because for so long, being a working caregiver has been, it's kind of like, I'll be honest, it was something I didn't admit to for a long time, because you thought there was a stigma around it. And I have worked at places where they've said, okay, well, we're having meetings at 9 o'clock at night, like, you need to be here, you got to figure that out, and certainly that didn't make me feel seen or included or supported by that organization. So, and there didn't need to be meetings at 9 o'clock at night. It's just, how some of these cultures evolve in the wrong ways. So I do think that this is the time for organizations, for managers, for business owners and individuals to really think about what success looks like for you. What do you personally need, as a worker, and what does your team and your organization need? How do we change that? And, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess unfortunately, in other countries, a lot of this is mandated by the government. It's across the board. It's, everyone gets paid leave. Everyone gets, a 4-day work week or whatever it is. And yet here in the US, it's company driven. There's no catch-all overarching policy to really support the humans in the, so particularly the caregivers. So I think it's going to be on us to raise our voices. If you want to advocate for policy change within your organization, if you want to advocate for change within your team, if you want to take that action, continue to participate in these Ellevate conversations, particularly mobilize women, which will be happening this June. We not just have a conversation about a topic like this, but then come forward to the table with solutions that you can implement in your own company. But, there's definitely a lot of great research out there right now on this topic, and we'll continue to talk about it in our roundtables and in the podcast as well.
Yeah. A lot of what you're saying is not just about caregivers, like you said, right? It's the human-centric aspect and the culture within companies that can drive that, since it's not being driven by the government, which is a whole other conversation for another day. But I mentioned culture because today, actually, I led our interview with Miriam Grobman, who I would say is one of my favorite nerds to talk about culture and business leadership with. She's a consultant. She helps leaders really develop their skills and helps companies develop their leaders in a way that I think is incredibly effective. She's no nonsense. She is extremely knowledgeable, uses a lot of data, facts, and figures. And I mean, as you can see, I really like Miriam. She's a good friend. So it's an interesting tie-in. Miriam and I have spent quite a bit of time talking about culture and how you build that up, and we do discuss that in this podcast, so that your team is engaged. We even talk about meetings. We talk about meetings quite a bit in this discussion. We do not talk about 9 p.m. meetings. Maybe we should have. I think it'll be an interesting perspective to add to this conversation.
I cannot wait to listen to this.
And as an extra bonus, Miriam is actually going to be our guest expert in the Rising Leaders Roundtable this Thursday at noon Eastern. That's the roundtable I host every week. And she'll be there, and we'll be talking about going from peer to boss, which is a big transition that happens to a lot of us at some point in our careers. And the dynamics really change. And you have to be ready for that.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's hard. I mean, I think you and I have both gone through that process of going from peer to boss, and it happens at various times, throughout your career in different small and big ways. I can't wait for that roundtable. I know other conversations we're having this coming week at our roundtables include constructive conflict at the executive roundtable, expanding your toolbox for greater clarity at the entrepreneur roundtable, which also is so important. Clarity is top of mind for me lately. A midlife image refresh for a new year and new you at the Career Changers roundtable. Stretching your comfort zone at our Women Seeking Confidence roundtable. And we also have roundtables for seasoned professionals, Black women's holding space, and more. So please join us at one of our upcoming roundtables. You can learn more at EllevateNetwork.com.
Great. So let's go to my interview with Miriam, and we'll be right back for her section on First, which we still have not found a good name for. I am so happy to be here today with Miriam Grobman, who is, I will say, one of my favorite nerdy people to nerd out on company culture, management, and life in general. How are you, Miriam?
Good. Kind of excited that a nerd, at some point in life, a nerd became a virtue and a thing to be proud of. And then you find your nerd friends to hang out with in different spaces. So thank you for having me.
It's funny, but it is. I remember not wanting to be a nerd when I was younger, but I wear it with pride now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Miriam, how are things going? I know, you've been on the podcast before, which is great. I think you're our only guest that's returned for a third time.
Wow. Now I'm really feeling special.
You are. And I was really looking forward to this because I wanted to catch up with you. And I apologize to our listeners if we go into different things and all over the place, because we will be catching up. But also, there's a lot of stuff that I've been thinking about that I knew you would be a good person to ask. And I thought that if I'm going through a lot of these questions, a lot of people might be going through them too. But first off, how are things in Brazil? I know your life has changed quite a bit during the pandemic.
Yeah, I picked the best timing to have a baby, a little girl. She's going to be 1 year old next month. Oh, actually, it's this month already. So time flies. I started, then stopped, and then went back to my PhD in organizational behavior. And I guess I continued having my company, but changed a little bit my focus in terms of before I did a lot of work with women's leadership. Now I'm expanding to men as well. I'm very inclusive, but the point of leadership is obviously it's not gender specific, so I can incorporate specific content that attends different needs. But I'm always more interested in leadership and culture, so I'm changing my focus to that and working more with startups, which is what I enjoy most doing.
Yeah. I know we've talked about it before, but what made you change your focus to make it a little bit more broader than just focusing on leadership and women?
Yeah, so I guess there's this saying that I don't want to be part of a club that accepts me as a member. So I felt like, yeah, women's leadership became a little bit like a club that everyone started joining and pushing their own diversity agenda or whatever waves they were trying to ride. And I felt like, okay, whoever wanted to get the data, the information, the insights now has all the access, all the resources. They're so broadly available that people don't need me as the guide to that universe. So I felt like I could step out and try to explore other fields. And I'm someone who really loves learning. So I felt like I really tapped out my learning on that topic. And I kind of wanted to broaden my own thinking and challenge myself to think of other trends that affect our work life.
And have you found other trends that you're like specifically interested in exploring now or helping people navigate?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one big trend that is always interesting to me is leadership and is organizational culture. But now, it for me it started before the pandemic, but the pandemic made it very clear that we now have this kind of hybrid workplace. People work from different places, from different countries. During different times, during different days, and different configurations. So this remote work world is something that's very interesting to me, and specifically for my segment, remote leadership. Like, how do you lead people that you don't meet face to face every day? What are the challenges of that? How do you develop a culture? For example, if you're a remote company, remote first company, how do you motivate employees? How do you recruit people? Those are the types of stuff that are quite exciting, and it's an infinite sea of questions to explore. So I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, it must be very different. And I mean, I see it all the time with us too. And as I said at the beginning, I might use this as a little bit of a counseling session. But it is hard keeping people engaged in a remote environment, and it is hard keeping even like hybrid environments in my mind are probably even harder. We've tried to do it where we have some people in an office and some people not, and it's just not very conducive to anything. What are the questions that you're hearing the most in this like world of remote? Is it more of an engagement aspect? I know for me, a lot of the questions I have right now or things that I've been dealing with is how do we make meetings more effective in this type of world, where we're all zoomed out, where we're all just not even seeing our body language most of the time, and how do we actually make things move forward? I don't know if there are questions similar to that you've heard coming up a lot.
Yeah, I mean, meetings are definitely a drag for many people, and I found so many interesting. I was recently doing a training for new leaders that are all working remotely, and I went and looked for some stats on meetings, and it was incredible that the amount of stats and the content of the stats. So basically, managers spend between like something like 30 and 50% of their time in meetings. It seemed to me like a conservative number based on what I'm
I was
seeing.
gonna say
Yeah, like I would expect
that
it to.
seems very low.
Yeah, maybe it was a pre-pandemic stat. I don't know. Employees spend something like 2-3 hours a day in meetings. Someone estimated that the organizations spend $213 billion or on ineffective meetings. So
I
the numbers are pretty crazy. Like the last stat I would share is 90% of employees say that they procrastinate during meetings.
yes. I mean, I'm glad people actually accepted it. But like, if you ask me, so thinking of those stats, like I know I see my calendar, and like I would say probably 80% of my time is in meetings. And I don't know about the cost to our company or anything, but I can tell you that the cost to my just energy levels is very high.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can relate to some extent. Actually, since I left the corporate world almost 7 years ago, actually more than 7 years ago, time flies.
Wow.
It's crazy to say that. The amount of meetings I have to attend reduced drastically. So in some way, I don't relate to some of my clients' realities. But recently, with my PhD, I have these 3 hour long classes on like very technical and complex subjects. So it reminds me of those kind of like budget meetings I used to have, or any other ones where people present tons of information and expect you to absorb it. And it's just so difficult to focus, to pay attention, and especially when you have this screen that you have to stare at and maybe sometimes you have to do something in the meeting and stare at the screen, so it's so confusing and tiring. So it's something I think about all the time, how to make these interactions better.
So what are some of the like specific pain points you're hearing, and what can people do to make meetings better?
Sure. So the three main ones I'm hearing are probably one, well, let's make it four. The four main points I'm hearing are: one is meeting lasting too long, too much time, too many discussions, too much information, etc. Uh, Too many meetings. So I have so many meetings about the subject that it's just a never-ending discussion. Um, Meetings that where nothing gets decided, so that the decision is, let's have another meeting. And
Yes.
yes, let's have another meeting about the meeting. And the last one that is kind of interesting, I wasn't expecting it, but it makes a lot of sense. It's meetings where someone or someones talk so much on either tangential topics or topics that are relevant to them, or just saying stuff that is doesn't make sense. So someone who basically hogs the meeting, but then nobody steps in to change the subject or to focus on what the meeting was about. So I think that one was one of the biggest pain points for people about meetings, and that's one that I kind of didn't expect but makes sense.
Really? So I would have thought, certainly, like, I understand the like having too many meetings or meetings that are lasting too long. We've gone through experiments of like, do we do more frequent shorter meetings? Do we do like, depending on what we're trying to accomplish? Um but the one about people hogging the meetings, I feel like I see more of a harder time of getting people to engage in a discussion or even make it something a little bit more. You and I have talked about constructive conflict in the past, like making it more of something where you have a debate happening versus just people going into the groupthink of agreeing.
So I would say it depends probably on the kind of the hierarchy and the power distribution of the meeting. So if you have someone who is, let's say, the manager or the teacher or something like that, and then the others are employees or students, then it's one type of thing. But when you have a meetings of peers or like executives that are trying, let's say, to each one justify their seat or show they did a lot of work or show how amazing whatever they did was, then it's a kind of a different group dynamic. And then you have more of this kind of probably hogging of time experience. Um, I'm I don't have the scientific number of distribution of meetings of those one type or the other, but I'm trying to like theorize here. For me, so back to your original challenge of kind of engaging people in the meetings, one of the things that I try to do as a teacher when I teach my leadership courses is try to think about kind of what do I want from my audience? What do I want them to learn? What are the questions that might exist in their mind? Where, like, if I present the concept, where would they be like scratching their heads and thinking, what is she talking about? Or how do I apply this? So I'm trying to kind of put myself in their shoes, and then whenever I'm teaching, now I'm much better at it when I used to be before, because now, like in this virtual format, is absolutely crucial to keep everyone on track. So I make sure that every, let's say, 5 or 10 minutes, there is some sort of activity or feedback loop to whatever we're doing. So, for example, let's say I'll present a topic, then I'll say, okay, let's discuss this topic. Give me an example. Does this make sense? How does this look like in your world? And I'm specifically giving some examples that are totally applicable to any kind of meeting and not just to a course context. But I think this is one big mistake that people make in meetings, is that they come in kind of with let's say a script in their mind of what they want to communicate, and they just start communicating, sharing information or sharing numbers without thinking, what does my audience want to hear? What do they care about? What are they concerned about? Where are the moments where I can, let's say, press their buttons in a positive way? Like, where can I inspire them, or where can I instigate their curiosity about something? Is there some pain point that if I talk about this pain point, people would really want to share what they think about? So these are kind of little triggers that you can incorporate into your meeting to get more action, let's say, in how it's run.
I was reading something about almost having, I can't remember what book it was, but almost having like an intentional conflict starter.
Sure.
Like having someone that can really like make people start debating things, because that's what I see as hard. And I see it as harder in the, I don't know why I see it as harder in the virtual world. Maybe because I feel like the full spectrum of body language and stuff is not like conveyed. But I find it harder. I've certainly find it that I've seen less of debates going on than I would like to in some of our more like high level meetings.
So I would kind of dare to theorize that maybe some people are multitasking while they're in the
Well,
meeting.
that's why I think that is what I would think too.
But maybe if it was something that really mattered to them, they'll stop multitasking. That could be one thing. The other kind of technological thing that I noticed. Sorry, go ahead. I think you have some reaction.
I was
to
just
that.
gonna say, you think it would matter? You think all of these things should matter? But yeah, I understand what you're saying about multitasking. We've all done it.
Yeah, and I think one, just to be fair to people, I think that's the point. If you have too many meetings, too much stuff going on, it's really hard to get engaged with any particular thing. So sometimes maybe the answer is to have less meetings, to have shorter meetings, to just focus, instead of the 5 topics you want to cover, just focus on one topic, have a good discussion, and then discuss the other one maybe through email. Not all topics are born alike, so that's another thing. Like, a lot of times people have a meeting, the meeting that could be an email.
Oh God, yes.
We've all been in those meetings, and I think they're more common than not. And I think we as humans, we're kind of lazy sometimes, so we kind of call that meeting that could be an email because we're too lazy to write the email. So maybe we kind of tell ourselves.
Guilty.
Or we write too many emails, so people stop reading our emails. So we want to have a meeting to make sure they pay attention. And then we maybe, instead of an email, we need to send them a mem with just like the main point of what we need them to know.
How do you decide? Like, I don't know. I always struggle with this. Like, how do you decide what is really, should we talk about this or not? Like,
well, I think probably if it's a question, you should just send an email. Because then, if it's something you're like, I'm not sure if it's important, and you send an email and someone, let's say, responds with an angry email or calls you or sends you a message, you're like, oh, actually it's important to them. Let's have a meeting because there's a bigger context that I wasn't aware of. Let's say like that. Or you just get no reaction. And then you're like, okay, maybe they didn't understand my point of why it's relevant. So let's ask some questions to understand why they're not reacting.
when in doubt, keep it short.
Yes, absolutely. When in doubt, keep it short. Most meetings, in my opinion, could be eliminated. I was once doing a consulting project for a company that wanted to improve its communication processes. And one of my tasks was to map all their meetings and trying to figure out how to streamline them, how to organize them better, what kind of cadence they should have, that sort of stuff. And I asked the CEO, like, which meetings do you think are most important and we should definitely keep? He said, I don't care. You can kill all of them. So he's basically was expressing his frustration at how they were having so many meetings and they weren't getting anything done.
Did you eliminate all of them?
I didn't, because it wasn't my place to eliminate all the meetings, but a lot of the meetings that people have are that's what I say, like these information sharing meetings. Sometimes the reason is because you don't have systems. So you have to have these meetings where like everyone comes in with their Excel spreadsheet and then try to understand which number each person has and try to align the numbers. And sometimes the solution is to just have a common company dashboard where all the numbers are displayed. So then you don't need to have all these alignment meetings. This could be a numerical thing. This could be something related to how you do something in the company, how you interact with the client in specific situations. So I guess the answer is, if you have a process, some automation, that can eliminate a lot of the meeting burden that happens in companies, in my opinion.
Yeah, I could see that, especially like what you were saying about metrics and dashboards. We have like a recurring team meetings for each of our teams, like on a weekly basis. Do you see with your clients a lot of these like standing meetings that just exist because they've always existed?
Sure.
Just, just like
Yeah, I think what happens sometimes is that managers feel like employees are not sharing information, or there's silos, or there's disconnects, whatever it is, and then they say, well, let's have a meeting where we all share information. But then it creates this group dynamic where everyone feels like they have to share information, because otherwise, if they don't share the information, it shows they haven't done anything, and then they look bad. Or it's not even looking bad, it's like everyone is doing it, so I have to do it too. And then some people are better than others and organizing and kind of streamlining their thoughts and saying, I did these three things and this is the impact of the thing that I did for the rest of you. While others go into these very long speeches. And then if you have enough people that go into very long speeches, it becomes this really boring meeting that everyone participates in but doesn't know why they're doing this meeting anymore.
yes.
Not fun. I don't know, I would say kill the meeting.
Kill the meeting. That should be the title of this.
Yeah, maybe I'll write a book about it. The
You
title of the
should.
book will be Kill the Meeting.
You should. I actually just read one of the books that I was reading. Was recommended by one of my colleagues, and it is called Death by Meeting.
Yes. Very good title.
Have you read that?
No, but it's the perfect title.
Death by Meeting. And ironically, what the book actually proposes, instead of killing the meetings, is separating the meetings, or making meetings almost like more meetings.
Oh, okay.
But less frequent. Or doing, like, if you're gonna do doing short 15 minutes, like status meetings, for example, but then separating anything that's more strategic to a monthly meeting,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can, like, during the month, like, maybe look at all the things that come up in those shorter meetings, and then decide on like the two topics or one topic that you want to tackle that is really important on the strategy side, to tackle it like once a month.
I think this is a great point, and actually I would build on it, and I would say you need to schedule the strategic meetings, because people get
Right.
lost in these operational who did what is the current problem meetings, and they say, well, we never have time to talk about strategy. So you have to kind of block time to talk about strategy, if it's a monthly or quarterly, and really talk about strategy. And if anyone tries to bring in non-strategic questions to the strategy discussion, just say, hey, we can talk about it in the debrief, we can talk about it afterwards, don't bring this topic into this meeting. And then, like,
Right.
people start looking forward to these meetings, because they're the meetings where you really talk about very meaningful stuff.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. And then for those meetings, if you have the big questions and the big strategic meetings, have very clear, very like specific clarity on who the decision maker is, on anything that's open, and use that time to discuss all different points of view.
And also, you need to prepare for those meetings. So this is another
Yes.
mistake that people make, is that let's have a strategy meeting for 1 hour where we'll discuss like our biggest challenges with 10 different people. It's impossible. And again, I know why it happens. Everyone has their good intention, but it's just, you cannot do that. Like, companies, for example, they have board meetings that are normally monthly or quarterly. And what happens with board meetings, whoever goes to the meeting sends the material in advance. It's very well elaborated, has a lot of details. The board members have to read everything in advance. Whether they read it or not, that's a different question, but let's assume it's a well functioning board. They read it in advance, and then you come in to discuss, not to go like sit there and present your 37 slides, maybe 37,000 slides during the session, and then have no time for discussion. So meetings should be about discussing ideas, brainstorming new approaches, uh, sharing, insights instead of sharing information, thinking about, what is our next most important steps. How do we, again, define the strategy, but then how do we make it happen? So what is the main action plan? Not what are the 37 steps of our action plan, but what are like the 5 things we have to do. So you have to get to that type of meeting, you really have to prepare in advance.
It's funny how, as you're talking about all this, I keep thinking about conversations on team culture and how that impacts everything, right? Like, you have to have a very strong culture of trust for people to come in, and that they've read the stuff that they need to read and they're ready to like have a discussion. You need to have again, trust if you're going to have people kind of debating and constructive conflict happening in one of those.
Yeah, and I think this is where the leader really needs to step in, right? Like, to build that trust. I would say it's the habits, right? Like, the first one is going to be horrible. The second one is going to be a little bit better. But like, if the leader is consistent with the expectations, he or she is modeling these behaviors, he or she comes in prepared, he or she needs to be willing to kind of sanction some bad behavior and say, hey, Bob or Mary, we all agreed that we need to prepare for this meeting so that a discussion happens. And it seems like you haven't read any of the materials. If you'd like to participate next time, please come prepared. And I mean, they can have that conversation in whatever format and language they feel comfortable with, but someone needs to kind of enforce the rules. And then at some point, it all becomes the culture and it becomes natural, but the initial growing pains need to be kind of managed.
It seems.
Why are you signing, Maricella? Isn't it so simple and easy?
It sounds simple and easy until you want to try and do it.
Yeah, it's not. That's why some leaders are more successful than others, probably, in the world of leadership.
It's a muscle that,
Yes.
like, you're doing in your courses, or like what we try to do in our safe spaces is like people can come in and question and ask and practice and become a stronger leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I can share a personal example. Like, I was leading some session where I agreed on a certain format with the participants and certain objectives, and someone came in and he wasn't prepared, and he started kind of distracting the group. And my old self would kind of let it slide and just try to avoid the conflict, and or escalate, maybe say something kind of not very nice, because I'll get frustrated. But in that case, I said, hey guys, we agreed on this. We can finish the meeting now if you prefer to use it for some other objective. And, if you choose to be here, these are the things that I would expect from you. And it sounds so simple. It was really hard for me to say that. But I felt like if I don't do this, then I'm not really exhibiting leadership in that meeting. I'm not respecting myself, as a leader, as a person in that meeting. So I have to kind of stand up for myself on this forum. And maybe it's part of growing up a little bit, like having time to reflect. But at some point, you kind of need to cross the road and say, am I going to be a passive participant of what's going on or in what I want to happen, or I'm going to drive the reality that I want to be part of? And it takes a while to kind of get that to an answer in this very complex philosophical question.
No, but it's a complex philosophical question. But I think we all face it at some point, and that's where leaders become leaders. Like when you actually, like you said, become part of the solution and like stand up.
Yeah, and some of it is having the opportunity, because you're not always in that position to take control of the meeting and expect things from other people. So it's kind of having that formal role. And some of it is your own process of deciding to cross, like I mentioned.
Well, this has been helpful, at least for me, as I ask all my questions. But I'd love to hear a little bit about what else you're doing, because I know that your focus currently is not just on meetings. This is just my desire to get my questions answered. But what new things are happening in your course, and topics that you're talking about that you've been thinking about in the last few months?
Yeah, so I'm always adding new stuff, and the thing I've been rolling out over the past maybe 6 months or so is this kind of robust leadership program that I've always wanted to build. And it's sort of, when I became a leader or when I joined companies, it's the program that I wish I had, and the insights that I wish someone told me instead of me learning them the hard way. So I'm building that into this program, and how to run meetings better, how to prioritize things, how to influence people, how to structure your strategy, how to communicate better at kind of different levels of leadership, but moving towards this executive communication versus just communicating information, how to manage people better, all these topics that we think are so obvious and available everywhere, but somehow there are always these very generic ideal world insights that we read and we don't know how to apply them to our reality. So this is what I've been building, an answer to that, and just like focusing on the real challenges people have and giving them like these small strategies, behavioral changes they can implement right away to make their lives better, to make their companies better, um, and to kind of inspire the people that they lead, instead of just being these generic managers that execute tasks and just passively float on the river.
I really like that, and I really appreciate that. That's kind of, you and I, like, you were my first or second guest for the managers roundtables that we do at Ellevate, which is all about this, right? Like, how do you get questions answered that you can't just go to Google to answer, because, like you said, you're going to find something generic or not really helpful. I do think there's an aspect of like hearing it from other people who have been on your shoes. Like you're saying, these are the things that you would have liked to know.
Yeah, and just to kind of give a disclaimer, I'm not that knowledgeable about all these topics. So what I normally do is that I reach out to different successful leaders that I have in my network, and I kind of tap them for these different knowledge bites. So it's like a fun thing for me, because I'm also learning as I'm building those programs.
I love it. It is very aligned with what we're doing, and I really hope you can join us for another one of the manager roundtables in the new year. To have you as a guest expert, it would be fun.
Yeah, it would be fun. You guys invited me last year actually it was this year, for this managing upward session. Yeah. And then I ended up writing an article based on that session for Forbes, and it was one of my most read articles. So that was fun.
I love it. Which I will say, just for here between us listeners, that also came up from me wanting to ask Miriam questions of things I was dealing with. So this is how it goes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to have you again on the Managers Roundtable. We can talk about it after this. But first, Megan would kill me. Megan, who is our podcast brain, would kill me if I do not do a lightning round with you, as we've been doing with our guests.
Sure.
So we'll get started with those. Introvert or extrovert?
Ambivert.
Ambivert. Yeah, you're kind of like me. Well, I'm a closeted introvert.
I might be leaning now after the pandemic of moving closer and closer to the side of my introvert friends.
Favorite day of the week?
Doesn't matter. As an entrepreneur, there's no variation between days. Monday, because you're so happy as an entrepreneur to start your week.
So what's your Monday morning staple then?
These days it's making breakfast for my daughter, shaking some formula. That's my Monday habit in the morning.
Early bird or night owl?
More night owl, but actually I figured out reading Daniel Pink's book When that my ideal hour is 11 a.m. in the morning. So it's not early in the morning, but it's like early afternoon.
Oh, interesting. I haven't read that.
Highly recommend. Excellent book.
When?
When is the right time?
I will look it up. Who's your dream dinner guest?
Maya Angelou.
Oh, that's a good one. She would be so great to have.
She was amazing.
Yeah. Pet peeve?
Next.
Okay. Favorite recent read?
The Rosie Project. It's a series of 3 books about this guy who is kind of, he has Asperger's syndrome, so he sees the world in a very different way than most people.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's like when you don't know what are the social rules for anything, you get into a lot of trouble. So I can relate in some ways as someone who changed a lot of cultures and countries.
Interesting. Top self-care practice?
Working out with my personal trainer. That was the best thing that happened to me during the pandemic. So working out. Someone who's never worked out in her life. It's like a really amazing achievement.
Congratulations.
Thank you. All of you can do it if you want to.
No, it's just a lot of changes during the pandemic, but I think we're all going through that.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting to see how we're going to get out of this next year, if we ever do. And how many things go back to how we were before, and how many of us really take this into account for the future.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. We can record another podcast about that next year and see what has changed.
Yep. And then finally, what's one question or thought you'd want to leave with our listeners?
I guess the one thing I always try to do is to challenge my thinking by meeting or interacting with people who come from different backgrounds. So I think this is the best way to learn, to kind of explore other people's universes, way of thinking. And we can all do more of that than instead of trying to impose our thoughts and ideas on them. And I think this is something that we don't do enough of.
I like that. Thank you, Miriam, for being here and for always being a great sounding board, I would say, for me, and a person that I really enjoy talking to and comparing notes with on how things are going around the world.
Thank you. I always enjoy challenging questions, and I always say when I'm teaching my sessions, I love when people disagree with me, and everyone thinks it's so crazy, but it's always generates a really good discussion.
I am pro constructive disagreements.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, and I look forward to catching up soon again.
Welcome back. That was such a great conversation, Maricella. I always love hearing from Miriam, and certainly can't wait to learn more from her and go deeper on the Rising Leaders Roundtable, where she is going to be leading the discussion on going from peer to boss.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that. I always have a lot of fun with Miriam whenever we're nerding out on our management topics. So it'll be a fun one. I did want to say squad applications are open. Your squad can be a great asset in just like the roundtables, but with a little bit more of an accountability aspect, because squads, you meet every week with the same group of women who can help you break down your goals into smaller milestones, who can help give you advice, and you can really go deep into what you want to do and have that accountability for that 12-week sprint. So applications are open. Go to ellevatenetwork.com and check out our squads.
Okay, I cannot. I've already signed up for mine. It'll be my third one. So always a lot of fun with the squads. Actually, no, it'll be my fourth. Oh my gosh. It's amazing how I've learned and grown through each cycle of squads. I think you always approach it where, there's a new opportunity you're seeking or thinking about, and it's just a great way to dedicate that half hour a week to work through that with your peers.
Yeah, and I will say each squad is so different. So no matter how many times you do it, and you get to meet really wonderful people, you get different perspectives, you're tackling different problems. So it's really worth the time that you put into it.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely been the best ROI on my time that I've ever had. So it's a great, and I encourage everyone to apply at ellevatenetwork.com/squads. And let's talk about some people who are doing amazing things in the news this week and must have had a squad cheering them on behind them.
Yeah, we have our little segment here where we're going to be celebrating firsts for women because they're still happening, and we can either take it with a grain of salt and say why is this still a first, or we can just choose to celebrate and cheer people on. So Wang Jieping became the first Chinese woman to complete a spacewalk.
Michelle Jubilier was named the first female CEO in the 80-year history of Capitol Music Group.
That's a long time. Xiomara Castro was officially proclaimed as the first woman president of Honduras, which as a Central American woman is very exciting.
Absolutely. British Sikh Army officer Preet Chandi became the first woman of color to ski solo to the South Pole.
Oh, wow. Jeka Delac became the first Somali American mayor in the U.S. So these are some of the firsts that we're celebrating this week.
It's so amazing. And I want to amplify this because we, Maricella and I talk a lot about, how we're feeling and the mood that the world has us in our lives and our work. And I don't know these people personally, but I'm excited. I'm excited to celebrate milestones. And Maricella has said it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And that is true. It's the little steps, one step forward, one step forward, one step forward to move us all forward. And so we want to celebrate that because I think that we're all worth celebrating and recognizing the great work that we do.
100%. And would love to celebrate you too. So if there's something you want to share, some big win that you're proud of, we're always here to cheer you on. You can email us at podcast@ellevatenetwork.com.
And join us back here next week for our episode with Audrey Hampner. She is the co-president of Ellevate Dubai, the founder and CEO of two companies. One is the Bedrock Program and THG Advisory. And she really focuses on career coaching, specializing in coaching for teens and young adults, as well as risk operation and governance advisory. So we're going to learn a great deal with Audrey about everything from managing risk, improving efficiency, and achieving those career milestones. Thanks so much for listening to Ellevate. If you like what you hear, help a girl out. Subscribe to the Ellevate podcast on iTunes, give us 5 stars, and share your review. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Ellevate NTWK, that's Ellevate Network, and become a member. You can learn all about membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. And to our voiceover artist, Rachel Griesinger. Thanks so much, and join us next week.